Welcome in, folks. Today we have another build for the 5B1C collaborative series, and we are going back to our little vacation spot we've built in previous episodes, and we're diving into adding some industry near our little vacation island, kind of home away from home spot, away from the downtown. We had a small area sort of between these mountains on the other side of the highway that was largely undeveloped, and many of you in the comments suggested using forestry as a way to fill that area and give this space some industry development. Now, if you are new here, be sure to hit the subscribe button, leave a like down below, comment if you have thoughts or suggestions for the next build. Also, be sure to check us out at twitch.tv/slay3k, where we play a variety of games with our community. Now let's dive into the build. So the reason I decided on doing forestry here, which is kind of funny because I think we've got like 2 or 3 other forestry spaces on this map. I think it fits really well though, given the terrain, but it was something that you guys recommended and it just sort of made sense for the space given that it is on an incline. And additionally, I think that the assets work very well on some of those slopes, so they won't look too funky when you place some of the assets for forestry up on a slope. You know how sometimes you get that weird, it just reacts weird to terrain, right? So this might clean some of that up and give us something in the background that actually looks nice instead of being a little bit more of a distraction from our pretty views up here at the beach. But the other thing I thought about too was ore. However, I thought ore was going to be a little bit more distracting, especially because I think to do it properly, we need to carve a little bit more of a hole here. And then I don't know, it was starting to seem like something that might get a little bit too busy in the back, and that's more of an aesthetic perspective, but I also don't have a ton of space here, so I felt like mining in this area might get a little bit difficult. But I don't know, that's just me. It may be more of an aesthetic thing than anything else. But the other thing I considered too at some point, which may be a cool addition, would actually be to come out here with the road and then have farms placed sort of in this almost like valley. It's not flat, but it may be something that we can kind of smooth it out enough to get some fields, some smaller fields in this area. But one thing I might do in another episode down the road would be to actually have this train line run along the highway and connect us to where I want to put some of our forestry stuff. Now, I think that would be really, really helpful, obviously, to, you know, transport goods and things, but I think it would also make this area kind of look a little bit more official, like a little bit more of a little industry pocket out here near where all these houses are. Now, the difficulty that I'm going to have here is this slopes relatively quickly uphill. So I'm going to carve out some space for a few buildings down here. And then I want the road that's going to be connecting a lot of the plantations for the trees to be on this slope with sort of a cliff on one side and then, you know, going up on the other. That's sort of what I envisioned in my head, though I could see it not working out. So I'm totally prepared for that to some degree as well. I'm going to go and take out the power lines. We're going to take out the trees and we're going to get a nice working area set up so we can sort of see what this is going to turn into. I admittedly don't have a ton of experience working with industries. Some of that's because, as you guys are probably well aware of by now, I don't focus as much on like perfectly functional cities, though they are functional. It's just I don't always do the industries like perfect. Like it's not always about efficiency as much as it is aesthetics for me. I want to create something that looks, you know, the part. So in some of my more recent cities, I've actually done more industry work, but that's mainly been around, you know, cargo areas and stuff for ships and a few things here and there to bring in supplies and goods and whatnot. And that's actually been a lot of fun because I've found better ways of filling up pockets of cities with industry materials and buildings and warehouses and all that. I did a city not too long ago where I felt like I had finally achieved what I wanted to in terms of a look, and it was using a lot of the vanilla assets that come with industry. So I think I'm like late at getting to that. I don't know. But I did find really cool ways of incorporating different aspects of Industries DLC to create really dense industrial areas, especially right outside of a city. So doing something more rural is something that I'm less versed in, but it is really cool to do a whole port area where you have all the trucks coming in, you have the ships going out. It's just not something I did very early on when the DLC came out. It took me a little bit to figure out how I wanted to work that out and how I wanted to incorporate my builds. And prior to that, I was using a lot of workshop assets to create the density that I needed. But thankfully, with vanilla assets and really trying to utilize them in a way that fits the way I build, it's been actually really helpful. Another thing that I don't do a ton of is building on inclines like this. So this is actually something that I'm probably less familiar with, at least recently. I've caught myself just building a lot on sort of like plain styled maps, like just very flat, built for farms. what I want to do is I want to have this industry road run out here. And this is actually going to remain sort of unfinished until I figure out if we're going to wrap around. And this rural road on both ends is going to sort of connect. Oops, did not mean to do that. At an angle. They're not going to be like hard lines or anything like that, because I want it to be like, all right, we're going uphill now. Here we go. So we're going to do something like this, although we're going to try to clean up that intersection a bit. Yeah, there we go. So something like that. And I think we're going to have another one over here. And then I also want to draw this road to continue down the middle, basically. So let's see how this is going to work out. If I have this come here, we need to just make some sort of an attachment here. And you can see how this is slightly elevated, right? It's not, doesn't seem too crazy bumpy or anything, but what I do want to add is just some of that cliff feature, right? So then this is going to have like some trees on it and all that jazz. I do want one spot where this road sort of comes down, then this might be the spot to do that here. And then I'm also going to have the road extend. Well, let's not do a path, but let's do a road. I'm also going to have the road extend upward, up the mountain a little bit. So that'll be something for us to do shortly, just to kind of extend the space a little bit up the mountain. So something like that. Maybe it's a little bit intense right through here, especially for trucks, I would think. So I'm going to see if I can clean that up a little bit by selecting the node. We're going to pick all these guys and we're going to adjust the slope. Yeah, something like this. Now, this doesn't look great, right? So we can go in here and we can smooth a little bit of that out. Yeah, something like that maybe. And then we can obviously fill in with some trees. It wouldn't be bad to also have some rocks in some places, as well as we, get to a point where we can maybe do a little bit of detail, put a little effort there just to make it all look the part. So now I need this to sort of wrap around, and I think I'm going to put the administration on this side somewhere. But as you can see, it's very organic. It kind of matches the mountain and how that's operating there with the edges. And then I want a spot here where it ventures up, but it needs to kind of zigzag like you would up a hill. So let's see if we can get this to kind of work the way I want. So so that's going to overlap in the way that I don't want it to. Split it apart a little bit. Something like that, maybe. Now, this becomes a little bit of an adventure, because I don't really know how it's going to work out, but it does need to just sort of follow the bends of the mountain, just like we did below. And then what I might have is it sort of trickle back down into this road. So what I'm hoping is we can fit a couple of the plantations here and a couple on top of that. I'm debating whether we need to come up into this space. That would be ideal to pull off that road, but that's kind of neat that it does that. And you can see like the road looks nice and following the edge of the mountain. So that's what I'm hoping for. And I don't know, I mean, we can't fit a lot above here, right? So I don't even know if we'll have something, as much as this may be rear access to some of the plantations, that will fit here. We will see. I may have not carved us enough space, which at that point we can adjust. But so I'm going to have this sort of bend around to there. And then let's go ahead and extend this industry road out this way. I don't really know where this road needs to go, but I think I might leave it open in case I need to expand further or do anything else out here. Oops. So let's go ahead and do another, something like that, and we'll sort of smooth this out. I just want it to be like, okay, we're going uphill, it not be the end of the road. I feel like that doesn't fit what I'm looking for. All right, so we have ways of getting up the first tier here. And now we need to sort of develop a couple of areas down here for traffic and for some of the industry stuff that we're going to be utilizing. What I am tempted to do is use some one-lane roads, or at least one-way roads, to create just some better, pathing for some of these areas, so that it doesn't get too bogged down in traffic, although it probably will regardless. I don't know how I want to set this area up, to be honest, so it's going to take a little bit of probably playing around until we figure it out. But even if it went in this way, wrapped around, we could put a building or two there. Maybe that's where our logging storage is, and then this can also connect down here. So kind of gridded, but, and then you fill in some of it with trees to keep it a little bit, you know, a little bit rural, I guess, in a way. It's sitting like at the outskirts of a little vacation town. So I don't think it needs to be anything too complex, really. I don't know where the train, if we brought the train in, obviously it'd be ideal to have it here, but that's going to be like really squished into this area. So I don't know if the train would be better suited to like come out here and just connect, you know, maybe the train station's here and this road wraps around. I think that might be kind of cool. I think tucking it in here might just get a little bit busy, although it would be sort of an end. I don't know how we would continue it around. So that's something to give some thought to, unless we just carved a hole through the mountain. That might be kind of fun, actually. So let's go ahead and mark this area for industry and have that ready to go. And we can start like placing buildings and seeing just kind of how things are going to fit, because I don't know that I've laid this out well enough for what we want to add to the area. So I do want to set this up as being the administration office, sort of right off this road. Like this is the first thing you'd run into. The next thing I know I want is barracks, which I think initially I was going to put the barracks and stuff up here. Let's see how we can maybe fit that in and tie it better to the administration building. Let's see. I'm just going to place it on that and then we'll move it. That's such a large building. I wonder if it would look terrible if it sort of like, if you came in here and there was like a one-way that went up here. And then kind of doubled back to here so that that covers. I don't know if that looks awful yet. It might, but it does cover our need for a road to this. So that fills up some of the space we've allotted ourselves, which is kind of nice. And then I'm thinking we can go in and add a bunch of trees here and make a lot of this look pretty solid in terms of density and nature, and plenty of nature in this space. So let's see. Now, the next thing I kind of want to see about is where some of our plantations can go. That might be kind of narrow here. Let's like place one and see what it looks like. I don't know what kind of tree we want to use. I'm tempted to use conifer. I think all the others are a little bit too bright for this area. Let's see. That does fit the mountain, though. If we can make that blend in with some trees and stuff like that, that might actually look really good. Now, you might be wondering if there's a little bit more complex way to get this to blend in, and I'm going to show you a route to take. Using BOB, we can replace the trees here. Now, this is really, really handy because you can get a much better look from other trees in the game. So you can see right now we have these trees selected. We're going to select them here in the BOB panel, and then you can actually pick what trees you want to replace it with. So I want to find something that just blends in more to some of the trees we have in the area. I don't want anything too crazy, wild, or I just want something that we can easily place trees around, and it'll look, these will look a little bit more like they're planted intentionally, right? But we can make it also so that it fits a little bit more in our area the way we want. Now that I've switched the tree, there's a couple things I want to be clear on. If you have multiple different uses of this asset in your same save, it's going to adjust all of them. So be mindful of that. Now, the situation for me is that with everybody working on 5B1C, they only would see this change if I share my BOB settings, which is a file you'd have to dig up in some of the save content and stuff like that that Cities puts on your computer. So if Overcharged Egg takes this, or if Yumble has it, he won't see the change I've made to the trees. However, I will when the file comes back to me. So just something to be aware of, because what this will do is this will affect any buildings with that tree, right? And you can get as specific as picking different, you know, individual trees and that sort of thing. But immediately you can see this blends in very differently from what we had before. The tree's better in terms of like its resolution and things like that. And it also still looks like a planted area. It doesn't match perfectly, but I kind of like that. I kind of want it to stand out just a little bit, like these trees were planted with a specific purpose. So we're going to utilize these as we progress. Now, what you should notice too is if I place another one down, see how the trees are already replaced? That is because we've replaced at least one set of trees from the file of the asset. So as long as I place these type of trees, you'll see that tree moving forward whenever I place this asset down. Just a side note, in case you're wondering, well, all the trees change across my map wherever I had forestry, and that's just a side effect of how that operates. You can get very specific. You can change certain props and things like that using BOB, but BOB is really, really handy, especially when I want to make things blend in a little bit differently. So it's something to keep in mind if you want to, take an asset that's vanilla and maybe needs a little bit of updating, especially if it's an older asset and is not utilizing some of the newer trees they've added to the game. It's just a way to, add something, and make things look a little bit better. So let's go ahead and see where else we can place some stuff. So we're gonna have to do the same treatment with this, right? It's sort of building specific, I think, if I remember correctly. But I'm tempted just to stick with that, and you can see it's already acting weird, but there we go. We fixed it. It's just because of the tree selection. It's only going to replace the trees that I've selected to be replaced. So I can do this, and we can have kind of two layers here, right? So it's going to look, it should look a little bit more polished than some of the base trees. And like I said, I sort of wanted these to fill in that space, and I think that's going to work out well. And then we can utilize just our tree brush to kind of fill some more of the dead space here. And again, it still looks like it's specifically planted for something, right? At least in my eyes, it doesn't look as lost as some of the base game trees started to look. So we're going to add, I think, another one next to it, and we're just going to build out this area. I do want it to look full, so let's go ahead and go to conifer. There we go. And you can see now it'll switch to the tree we've selected to be replaced. And you can already see how that kind of looks. Yeah, it looks like it's planted with intention, which is great. Let's copy another one and place it here. And then by shifting the angle a little bit, I think it looks interesting because it's like, what's going on there, from a zoom out view. And then you kind of realize, okay, again, they were planted a specific way to fill the space and have rows to them, I guess, for easier access is what I would imagine. But I've never actually been to a logging or forestry industry place. So we're winging this based on limited experience. But look at how that fills up some of our background. I think that looks really good, actually. So we get our trees in, and if you've watched some of my videos, I'm a big fan of just placing trees everywhere. So to fill dead space, and I think that looks pretty good there. I think we could put a couple more here before the turn. And then we need to also start filling in a little bit more of some of this lower area, because I don't want to get to a point where we're missing a whole bunch of stuff from an industry perspective for functionality. And see, that's getting a little bit big, and I don't know if that's super necessary. So what I'm going to actually, let's just do this. Let's just smooth that out a bit. I don't want the cliff showing through. So that's kind of what I want to prevent here. It's going to continue, isn't it? Okay. How can we get this to look a little bit better? Maybe if we go this route. You see it's still not wanting to cooperate. There we go. I think we got the cliff out of it. And it doesn't look too crazy. I guess we should define what crazy is in that instance, but... So now we've got the road running through here, and it's starting to look very rural and very separate from a lot of the roads we have near the town, right? It just looks different in that it is up here in the mountain. The shape of it and everything... I think that looks nice. So yeah, it's kind of interesting though, looking at what everybody's doing and how everybody's setting up their spaces. And then I was like, I need to do logging. And then you kind of realize we have three, I think this is our third logging area or forestry industry area. So I don't know, hopefully you guys don't mind the different takes at doing it. I'm sure that some of the other ones are probably laid out more efficiently than mine. But again, we can focus on some of the aesthetics and making it look pretty nice. And I think, again, coming back here, though, that looks pretty clean. It doesn't stand out in a negative way. I'm tempted to almost add a field of where trees have already been cut down. That could be kind of neat. I wonder, I don't know, that might be kind of cool to have a couple patches, but it may also look a little bit weird that it's just empty space. Just food for thought. Just food for thought. Everything's in our zone, correct? Good. So we do have some of this space here, and I don't know if I want to take off this road again or have a different sort of incline running up, you know, closer to the mountains. So I think we're going to focus here and have it sort of come off and then around like that, and then maybe dip back down into this road. So we have like one more loop to make, and then I think this will be a nice amount of build space for us to create everything we're looking to do. I know some of you may have like experience with like the trucks and things, and I'm sure this is probably not what you'd want to drive on. But doing my best given the terrain. See, like up here it kind of gets wild, right? Like that incline's, you know, I would not want to drive a truck up this. I've driven through some of the mountains near where I am, and there's some areas where it just, man, it gets wild. I don't know how some of those folks do it with how the terrain can be and all that stuff. It's just crazy. I haven't seen any trucks like run off the road or have an issue like that though, so thankfully, because that just to me seems pretty scary, especially if like I guess your brakes lock up and stuff. This gives us like another like 2 or 3, I think, areas here to put in. I wonder if we can fit the larger kind of plantation in like something like this here. So you can see this is a different building, and I still have to reset the conifer to fit the trees that we've started using. So we're going to go to BOB again, and we're going to switch. Oops, I select something. There we go. We're going to switch this out. And this one's a little bit different because it's going to show me like a sub building, which is kind of weird, but it's fine. We'll figure it out. And so you may, like, if you see this, you just have to select over here for the sub building, and then you can actually make the adjustment you need to make. So let's see if that covered like a portion of it, it seems. So extra, I wonder if I could just look that up. There you go. That's how you'd switch it if you had a sub building. Now that happens a lot with like bigger buildings, especially stuff I've pulled off the workshop. I've seen that a few times, and it can trip you up a little bit when you're just trying to run through and just replace things. But it's also really nice, like if you just want to replace a bench to match something that you have throughout your city, that can be a nice way of just cleaning up some detail. 1010 would recommend trying out BOB if you have not already, especially if you're getting into some of the detail work we've talked about in the past. So now we have a nice area of like all the trees set up here. I really like how that looks. Let's increase the size of this, and we're just going to sort of fill in some of this green just with trees, you know, slowly going up into the green spots here of the mountains. I don't want to make it too crazy dense, but I just want it to look like the trees sort of fade into the edge of the mountain here. I tend to really just try to focus on putting trees too, just where the green is. I don't want it to overlap too much of the cliff texture. That can be a little bit tricky and sometimes a little bit more work, but I think it looks, it tends to look a little bit better. Like right along the road here would be nice, like that. Just a few. And I think honestly, you could probably go in and match it exactly, you know, your trees up exactly. I'm not too concerned about it. Like, you know, these trees could match that tree, for example, and it could blend in even perfectly, but I don't mind a little bit of like change in color, like the color and stuff like that for where our kind of tree farms are. So yeah, you can see how this starts to fill up in density. And like I've talked about before, I think utilizing trees like this is very helpful. It gives you a change in the verticality that you're playing with, and it's not a building, right? So these can go really, really well in the background. If you had like a cool skyline up here, it would look kind of neat too. Maybe not a city with a tree farm right behind it, but yeah, you kind of probably get the idea. It's just a neat way to, if you can fill up your space with some trees, you can tend to get a nice, very natural look. The problem is like when to stop for me, especially because I like when I start putting them in, I want to fill up areas with trees, and that can be a little crazy. I think I have an issue with just having ground that just doesn't have anything on it. I think that's my problem. That is my toxic trait, is using way too many trees, I guess. All right, so now you can even see the roads, which I think looks really kind of cool, right? So if you zoom out and over, you can see the pathing here. I think that looks really good. So we need to, I think we have all of the like tree plantations we need in. Now it's going to be more of a focus of some detail work and getting our lower area set up here, and then trying to just set it up so it's, you know, at least somewhat efficient. Because I feel like it would be very easy to just leave it not be efficient. That wouldn't be ideal. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in this space, at least for right now, just so it looks a little more complete. We've got our roads in. Let's see how we can make this area work a little bit better in the space. So we've got our plantations in. That's done. Let's see what else we have to place here. We could put in a maintenance building, which might be good. I do want to fill up this space as if it is entirely dedicated to what we've built, right? So it's going to be very focused on everything forestry. So if we pull back, you can start to see how this immediately begins to fill the area. It looks relatively natural until you get to this lower road and some of the industry buildings we're going to be putting in. But for now, up here, it looks like it blends in, which is kind of the point, right? And again, the difference between doing that and like something like ore was we'd be carving in the mountain and placing a lot of like dirt textures and stuff like that. So I think this is a nice way to continue to make it in sort of our little vacation spot, our little away from home area, and then have just like kind of a forestry, you know, a solid forestry industry space in the back. So we have other buildings that I want to place. I want to try to build out this area as much as I can. And I think what we will do is probably get a sawmill in, and maybe a few other buildings just to kind of now shift it away from being all natural and just really start to make it feel more like an industry area. The thing I noticed though is this building is quite large. I forgot how large it actually is. So I want to see how we can fit some of these things in, but it may be difficult because I don't have a ton of space, or we just need to modify the space to make it work. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. And how we can make that happen. I don't know that we need a ton of storage right off the bat, so we can kind of see how things go here. I'm also seeing this isn't quite working the way I want. Oh, so the road elevates a little bit, so let's see if we can straighten that out, and we're just going to elevate it to here just for that building to be on the corner. So come in here like that maybe. We still have a dip. Where is that? Because... oh, I see what's happening. That's going to be because of the slope itself. So let's level out the road. There we go. And see if that can kind of fix it. Something like that here on the end. And we don't have that crazy, like kind of wild looking like divot at the edge there. And then we're going to bury this into some trees as well. And then let's run a few trees along the edge here. We can actually probably fill up this slope as well. Have trees kind of coming down. I feel like I'm definitely using plenty of trees. If you look around, it's a little much. Someone's going to be building and just realize, oh, we can't put any more trees here. And that's going to be my fault. Entirely my fault. So we have sawdust storage, wood chip storage. What do we want to do? I'm thinking we definitely need to get a sawmill in. So I wonder if that could work here. And then we can kind of tuck this into this road a little bit. I feel like this might get kind of heavy in traffic. So I'm wondering if we turn it onto this road instead, because this is going to be like a loop. Bring people around. So trucks can come in here, enter, come around, drop off. Kind of the idea, just to help with flow. Actually it's cutting around here, not the other way around. So we could also do engineered wood plant. We also have pulp mill, so we have a few options. I think this would be really nice to have in the background here, just as some piece of industry that's going to stand out and really look like industry. I'm almost wondering if we need to carve out a little bit more room to fit that building. I know I've been saying I want it to blend in nicely, but I do want something to sort of make it feel a little bit more industry heavy. Like that is what this area is designed for. I think that is a little bit of a tight fit though. Right off the highway, that might be a lot. Oh, wow, that really is a thing to do, isn't it? Having this building back here. It's massive comparatively speaking. Okay, I think I can deal with that. Having it turned actually makes it look a little bit less in size, which I think works out okay. So this is going to be pulling raw forest products and creating paper. This is going to be creating this is our sawmill. So we're going to get planed timber. So this is all going to come down here. Trucks can drop off here, or they can turn this way and drop off here. Okay. Storage is over here. We have our maintenance building in. I'm tempted to almost add some concrete under here and build put a few like trucks in and stuff like that. Maybe we'll see. The trees are getting rather dense, like right around that building. So there we go. We could do something like this. So we just kind of make it look more substantial by having kind of two lined up next to each other. Even if it's like a little bit separated there, and then we can run just a thin line of trees in. And then I think we just go ahead and fill up right behind it with some trees. And then I kind of want to make this area blended. I'm very tempted to change the trees here as well. I don't know that we need to do it everywhere, but it is very tempting. What I kind of want to do is just add like some spots of like broken down trucks or old trucks or something like that. We may have to go get on the workshop and grab just a couple of props just to make some of this like really, really sort of unique in its own way. Now that we have a handle on building placement, I want to see about how we can fill in some of these dead spaces. So like I mentioned before, I think I was going to go on the workshop, and I did. And I've pulled a few things to kind of turn in some of these areas into just dead space, kind of like unutilized space in the sense of anything that's really functioning very well. So I thought we could use some grass, make it look a little bit overgrown, put some dirt in, and then kind of do a little bit of light detailing to make it sort of just like junkyard space, like kind of industry, like worn out areas, if that makes sense. So we're going to play around a little bit with what we can do here and see if we can make that work somehow. So I've got a couple of decals. If you guys haven't checked out my decal video, it's actually pretty helpful to show you what decals can do for you and kind of how powerful they are. But there's a few on here that I think will come in handy. So we're just going to make this area just look like all worn out and just not as well manicured as maybe some of the other areas. You can obviously use surface painter instead of just using like decals if you are kind of limited on what you can add in, but you tend to be able to actually use decals over this to create even, you know, better sort of variety and an overall appearance in terms of how the layers work together and stuff. I just feel like it looks significantly better if you have decals in instead of just surface painter. But obviously this can be dependent on what all your PC can handle in terms of assets and that sort of thing. So if you do have surface painter and you are using decals, keep in mind that like I tend to like to do something where if I'm going to put mud or dirt down, I'm going to use something like this to kind of create an underneath like canvas, right? I don't want too much grass popping through in this area, although that is an option if you wanted grass popping through. That could kind of make it seem like the decal that you're placing or the dirt texture you're adding on top isn't as thick, you know? So the grass is kind of coming out and it doesn't have to be as full, I guess is my point. Now we're going to use a few of these so it looks like trucks have been driving through here. And I'm going to use a few of the drier, it's kind of like drier looking dirt over here. And then let's see what it looks like if we add. Yeah, something like that. And I'm going to sort of let it fade into being more grassy. Now look at that. So it looks like trucks have been driving through here. Let's add. Yeah, now it looks like trucks have been exiting here. I have an idea for how this is going to work, and I hope it does work. We're going to add in a couple of trees back here. Yeah. I love doing stuff like this. Doing like decay in cities is probably one of my favorite things. Now, let's grab a couple of props. I've got a few things. Some of them kind of fit, I think. Having some of these trailers might be good. And then we can throw in maybe something like this, like an old trailer. A couple of them. I'm saying they're old. They're not really old. They just, you're just kind of sitting here. Like, just, they needed to place something somewhere and they just left them here as kind of the overall look. And then I think I got, yeah. Can grab a couple of these. And then just excess trailers. And then I grabbed one, one really old bus. I don't want to load up too much stuff into the save file, obviously. And I don't really have any like junk to put in here, but that's okay. So you can see we've got like a nice little junkyard area here. Pretty simple, right? Just a few assets, some decals, some props, and we've created this whole spot. Now what you can also do to add something to it is we could go in and add a little bit of fencing. Let's see, what do we, let's just do a privacy fence. I don't want to look too, yeah. Now, the only bummer sometimes with certain fences, especially network fences, is that you're going to get the decals to overlap them. You see how it's overlapping? I don't know if I'm going to like that at all. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the fence in a couple spots. Maybe where it's less noticeable. Is it less noticeable? That actually looks like it's just the paint running off of it, doesn't it? At least in my opinion it does. So we're just going to use that here. I think it was once painted, or the wood is starting to deteriorate. That doesn't bother me as much as it does in some areas, so I think that'll be okay. So quickly you can see what a small area like that can do for the like space that you're working in, right? It adds some diversity to all the buildings. It adds something just sort of unique, right? And it pops a little bit because it's, you have all these buildings, you have all the structures, you have all the trees, and then you have this one area that just really stands out as being just worn out and tore up. And I think that's kind of a neat thing, because a lot of the city's buildings you're going to place are going to seem perfect or very clean for the most part. You can find assets and stuff that aren't, but adding something like this to just pockets of your city can actually, I think, dial up the realism. So now what I want to do is I want to sort of take that idea and apply it to other spaces to some degree without it getting too repetitive. We do have other areas here like we need to fill up that I don't know that I need to put anything building related in there necessarily. And I think it'd be kind of cool to have just dead pockets of space here that just aren't being utilized very well. Maybe there used to be a building there. I mean, that would also be cool, is to have some abandoned buildings too. You can really kind of play with stuff like that. I have a lot of fun creating those like sort of spaces where you're just not, you're not utilizing it for something too significant. Now keep in mind that decals can often kind of look funky if you place them too many times or if you stack them up a lot. I find it, again, kind of important to figure out when you can add in surface painter to make some diversity in it and make it look a little bit different. And we're going to go and fill this area so it doesn't have that little tear. Like we have this spot too, we can fill up. Clean that up a little bit, but now what I'm going to do is I want to go ahead and see. Let's actually just grab the grass we use maybe. And for like, if you're creating like some kind of like a junkyard area, you can use just kind of wild props if you wanted to, right? Like I just saw, hold on, let me see if I can find it again. A boat. It's like an old boat just hanging out here. It's just kind of whatever goes. I did one of these in a city one time and I found myself using just a variety of stuff just to make it look so dense with things that were just, oh, I don't know, worn out, abandoned. It can be kind of a fun challenge. Again, like you don't have a lot of that in cities all the time. Like you tend to have very clean things, you know, like it's going to be perfect. It's not going to show wear and tear. And I think that's kind of important to make things look a little bit more realistic. So we're just going to throw a couple trailers in here. Like they're waiting to be processed. And then fill in, kind of backfill it with some trees. So that takes up that corner. So now you can see like areas that looked empty and which is really nothing. Now look like it's pretty populated. I'm gonna fill this area in. That's good. You could go in and you could say, well, if we're going to do that, you know, should we do all of these spaces, like coming in here and adding that? And that's totally an option as well. Like I think here too with the driveway, like to the garage, like doing stuff like that is nice. You could go in, you could add torn up concrete to the road because those trucks tend to, you know, beat up the road a little bit. There's, again, it's just endless. I hope like conversations like this give you some sort of fuel, like a little bit of inspiration to go have some fun with some of the areas that you're working on and give you something to sort of play with, right? Like just something different that you haven't done before. Ultimately, I think that's, you know, important to, you know, continue to flex some different muscles and play with some different ideas. You could get actually, you could do a lot in some of these spaces too. Like if you have the right trees and bushes and things like that, that you can create enough density. I did like an overgrowth video too, where we talked about this and just finding different ways of showing change in height between like a road and where you kind of want something to seem, you know, filled up. So like here we have kind of a couple different heights in grass and trees and stuff like that. And finding ways to layer that in as well will help the appearance of your overgrown areas, especially as you go back more towards like a forest. There's a lot of weeds too, weeds and different types of plants that can appear like wild. I think that's really helpful when you're trying to create this look. Just sometimes just depends on how much you want to download, like how deep you want to go down the rabbit hole of assets and things. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to add a little bit of this to the edge here, going up to the grass. Kind of neat, right? So let's take care of this area. I'm going to add in, let's just do a couple of these big trailers. Let's flip it around because I don't want it facing that way. I want it to be something like they can go in here and pull it out if they need to. Like they just kind of left it there as that storage. Maybe it's equipment that they got transported back here. You'd obviously find some more broken down vehicles and stuff too. We're gonna go back to decals. Trying to mix up some of what I'm using between like dry dirt and the dirt that looks a little bit more like it's wet. So let's come in here and just do a couple trees. Now this still feels relatively empty. Can't really fit that, which is ultimately sometimes an issue. Let's see if we can just find some bushes that'll fill the space a little bit and make it look. And again, like I said, there's a bunch of stuff you can grab on the workshop. I'm using a little bit more of a limited amount of things just to keep the save file a little more approachable for folks that are going to take it after me. So something like that there fills that space. Now, the one thing I noticed is that this doesn't have like any sort of almost like driveway here. So let's see if we can just create something that looks like just a area that folks are walking and utilizing. Now let's see if we can add some decals in here to liven it up a little bit. One trick that I try to do is, I don't do this all the time, admittedly, but when you're placing a decal, rotate between every placement, and that'll keep it looking a little bit less repetitive at times. Yeah, it's kind of in the way. See if I can just boost the strength here and get another one in. Stop putting there, man. Okay. We're gonna do this a different way. We'll go in here and just do trees. This just felt kind of empty. We could obviously go in as well with BOB and replace the trees. In fact, let's go ahead and do that. Now, obviously, this has a lot of props attached to it, too. So we're going to go in. We're just going to just replace that. And there you are. Now it starts to blend in a little better. Let's do this also for administration. This is totally optional. You don't have to do this if you don't feel like it. But I do think it's important to, like, have as something that you guys can see so you know how I'm doing it. Because as soon as you go place one of the vanilla assets and you see the difference in what this looks like, you're going to be like, wait, what happened? So now you can start to see, like, look at how I think this looks really good. The amount of stuff we're using, which I don't think is really a ton. I think this is starting to come together quite well. We could get really, I mean, you could get really technical, especially with how this works back here with some of these pieces of rock. Like you could add in a bunch of stuff to make that stand out as well. I'm going to keep that a little bit simple, I think, for now. We've got a couple more spaces I want to do. I think this is going to be trees over here. Ooh, that was a lot. Just make that a little smaller, yeah. Let's figure out what goes here. It's going to be kind of the same sort of mix. Won't be that drastically different, but it'll be okay. Throw a couple of these guys in. I think it's time to bring back our bus. Like maybe they used this for transport back in the day. Oh, that actually looks like lumber. And that looks like a big old crate. Okay. I don't want it to look too, like, organized either. Let's add in some dirt. Especially, like, around the middle where potentially, like, some tractors or something like that get parked for a day or two. It may work. We can add to that, too, if we need to. Let's grab our grass. We're going to have it coming up underneath the trucks. So it looks really overgrown, like they've been there a minute. Especially these ones towards the back. I think that's probably pretty good before I overdo it. And then we need to add some decals in here to really take it up a notch. I'm going to try to create like a tree wall there so you don't see that it kind of, some of the detailing we're doing ends. It's kind of funny how relaxing this can get because you just sort of go into a zone. At least I do. I don't know if you guys have those moments. I know some folks maybe find those zen moments with like traffic management. Also, like for me, building skylines themselves is something that I can zone out on and just play with for hours. Look at that. Looks pretty good. Man, it's fun stuff. I don't know. I enjoy this. Probably more than I enjoy doing some of the other things in cities. Like just making areas just look absolutely destroyed is such a nice thing. And again, like depending on how much time you want to spend, right? Like you can go in and you could add a whole bunch of stuff like to these corners and things to make them look good. You know, a lot of times I'll pick kind of an area that looks sort of, okay, this is our view, right? Coming in from the water. This is our angle. So I want everything to look a certain way, especially from this angle, because this is the way I'm going to look at it the most. And then you kind of sell that idea. Obviously, sometimes when you're taking screenshots, you're going to take them from the best angle, you know. So I think for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with node controller. Actually, network multi-tool first. I'm going to make these into just like U-turn areas here for trucks and stuff. if you guys saw this in my last video, I talked about how to make those little teardrops so that you have cul-de-sac, especially in like residential areas. And then to sort of complete the idea, I think what I'm going to do, and again, I may actually come back to these and tweak this a little bit where, you know, you may have something later where it's the road continues or something. I'm going to just sort of make these appear like the ends of these roads are currently just storage. And then if we decide to add on to this road, we can come back and do that. Take out the props and do what we need to do to make that work. So I'm going to have it kind of go around to give it like an ending here that looks really appropriate. We also have some rock here. Clean on some of that and mix that in a little bit maybe. I'm going to make it look like a really good indoor road and then not want to extend it through here. It's going to look nice. It's crazy how much this is growing on me. Just adding in the rocks made this sort of connected to the other side a little bit in a different way. And it's really selling the idea that this is where the road should just end. So everything I planned at the beginning is now slightly an issue. I don't know how I'm going to accomplish things I talked about earlier now that I've kind of enjoyed placing this the way it is. But I guess that's part of the evolution of certain areas, right? This is kind of what happens as you progress. Sometimes you just have ideas and it works out. It's really cool to see things evolve like that because you don't always have to know the exact route to get to something. And often I think you got to maintain some flexibility because you got to be prepared that like once you get there, it may not work the way you want. And just some tweaks and things like that can get you to a spot that's actually really comfy and nice. You know, a lot of that can just be the layers that you do. And if you do networks first and you try to fill up after that, which is often something I try to do, then maybe sometimes the path changes as you go, but you can create something that still feels organic, you know, around a gridded system or whatever. I think there's just ways to do things. And once you find that comfy spot, I guess the order that you do things in, everything just comes together. It's interesting because I sometimes get really stressed about what I'm going to build. And then if I just kind of take a deep breath and just go about the process that I've used for years, like it just sometimes just works out. It's really cool. I probably should do like a whole water treatment facility. That may also need to be on the list at some point. I've made a few that are actually kind of detailed, which are fun, but yeah, I don't know. It's usually not something I jump to do. So I have an idea. Let's take some of the grass. Let's kind of fill in under the power line to give that some texture. Just because I'm trying to like cut where the like lines are running. That looks kind of nice. What other rocks do we have? Do we have more? I don't know if we have. Yeah, it's going to be kind of all the same set, isn't it? So I don't think there's going to be very small rocks. I probably should have used some of the taller mountain grass as well, or the bigger mountain grass like this to fill up more of the space. I just feel like it looks really empty. So let me do this. Let me actually go in and we're going to remove that strip that I added. And we're going to do the larger set. This is totally bonus. I wasn't really planning on going this route in here, but I'm going to kind of do this in a way that adds some texture to it. Obviously, we could go in and we can make it patchy with using different ore and stuff like that. That probably is the better route, but that looks kind of interesting. I don't know, I like it. We do have the incineration thing. I might end up moving this stuff at some point. I just don't know where I really want to move it to just yet. So I want to do sort of the same treatment on this side just so it looks kind of old, not really kept up. Add some trucks over here as well. And just add a little spot down here. You'll notice I do this like in a different order almost every time. I just kind of realized that. Like 1 minute I might just be placing decals down and then place the trucks down. The next minute I'm placing the trucks down and then doing decals. Consistency. Make sure my grass doesn't poke through the road. And again, we go in, add a couple trucks. You know, you can add whatever you want. You could add piles of junk. There's some ruined piles and things like that available in the workshop. You could do a whole bunch of stuff in here just to make it appear overgrown and just like lost, you know? And like, look at just that, right? It just adds something interesting to the space. Then if you jump down here to the other side of the road, it goes right down in the water. Really cool. I like it. I think that looks really solid. We really transformed this whole space into something, and I'm pretty happy with how it's come out. Obviously, we'll see how things progress, and if we have that next episode, we'll be working on extending maybe these to somewhere or having them blend in. I don't even mind them ending now. Like, they put the road down to, you know, continue building industry, and they just decided they didn't need it. You know what I mean? Like, I've seen that too, where roads just abruptly end around these kind of things. So, I don't know. Doesn't bother me too much. I kind of like it. Looks pretty good. I love that we added these little junkyard spaces in. I think that adds a ton to our build. And again, like, you can extend that all through this area, right? It doesn't have to be limited to just the area that I did it. Like, if you want to go up in the mountains and you want to do all that work and stuff, if that interests you, definitely go about it, because it'll be a really beautiful thing to take a couple screenshots of and share. So I guess now we'll cue some cinematics. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. This was a lot of fun for me to do something a little bit different than I normally do. I know I've done a lot of parks and residential, so this was a nice change of pace. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the subscribe button, leave a like and a comment down below. Let me know what you think of the detail and adding these little areas in, and I'll catch you next time. Take care, everybody.